The will reading was held on a quiet Wednesday morning, but my world shattered before the lawyer finished the first sentence. It was the kind of conference room that smelled like dust and old money, mahogany furniture, heavy silence, and the weight of something final. I sat third from the left, spine straight, hands folded. I was raised to be polite, to be composed. Emily, my younger sister, strolled in late, laughing into her phone, not a care in the world. She wore heels too tall, perfume too loud. Our mother followed behind her, perfectly pressed and not even pretending to mourn. Mr. Cartwright, our family's lawyer for over 2 decades, cleared his throat and shuffled the legal papers. He looked at me with something like pity. That's when I should have known. He began reading the will. Formalities first, estate declarations, and then, to my daughter Emily. A pause. I leave the sum of $8 million to be transferred immediately upon execution of this will, including all associated trusts, securities, and residential properties named under Schedule B. My heart didn't sink. It didn't race. It simply froze. Emily didn't react. She just crossed her legs, admiring her nails like she was bored. Cartwright continued, his voice softer. To my daughter, Caroline. That's me. My full name. I leave the remainder of my personal effects, excluding those listed under Schedule B, with gratitude for her resilience and character. Then he read the sentence that gutted me. This clause is intended as full satisfaction of any claim she may assert against the estate. Translation: I got nothing, not a dime, not a keepsake, not a say. My mouth went dry. I didn't look at anyone. I just sat still, the words ringing in my ears. Emily shifted in her seat. Our mother turned toward me with a hand on my arm, her voice coated in sugar. You'll be fine. You're a hard worker. You always figure it out. Go work. Not cruel. Worse. Dismissive. Casual. Like I'd been overlooked at dinner. Like $8 million was a matter of preference. Cartwright wrapped up in 20 minutes. Every line that followed referenced Emily's new assets. The Maui property, the Aspen condo, the Zurich accounts. None of it made sense. Emily never held a job longer than a year. She once asked me if Switzerland was in France, but she got everything. Again. I stood. I didn't argue, didn't cry. I just grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. Behind me, I heard Emily laugh. Well, that was efficient. Our mother caught up to me in the hallway. She placed a hand on my shoulder again. You know he loved you, she said. He just didn't show it the way you wanted. I looked at her. No regret in her eyes. Just control. The polished veneer of a woman playing hostess at her husband's final performance. What did you mean in there? I asked. When you said I'd figure it out? She blinked. You're strong. You've always been strong. I stared. You don't need money to succeed, she added. Emily does. There it was, not even dressed up. I nodded, stepped into the elevator, and watched the doors slide shut between us. As I descended, what filled me wasn't rage, it was clarity. They didn't see me, not really. They saw a safety net, a workhorse, the one who didn't ask for help. And so when there was finally something to give, they gave it to the one who always asked. Again. By the time I reached the street, something inside me had calcified. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I wandered 6 blocks before realizing my car was still in the garage. I didn't care. I needed air. I needed to hear the echo of this moment for what it was. I spent the rest of the day in a cafe, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the window. I thought about birthdays where Emily got gifts and I got responsibility. About college acceptance letters no one noticed. About promotions met with blank stares while Emily's yoga certification earned champagne. I thought about all the times I tried to do better so they'd finally see me. It had never worked, and it never would. When I got home, I changed into pajamas, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. Not to rant, not to post, not to complain, but to begin writing something else entirely. A boundary. One they would never see coming. Not yet. Not now, but soon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mother's voice. You always figure it out. As if being capable was a curse. As if I'd failed to be loved by being too competent. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound volume of essays, one of the few gifts my father had ever given me. Inside he'd written, "For the one who always reads between the lines." Even that felt cryptic, like affection through a riddle. But seeing through things doesn't mean you're seen. In that lawyer's office, in front of the people who were supposed to know me best, I understood something I'd tried to deny for years. I wasn't just unloved, I was inconvenient. Too capable to pity, too quiet to notice, too strong to protect. I wasn't the favorite, I wasn't the baby, I wasn't broken. I was the bridge they used to carry Emily, the background character, and now, the ghost. But here's the thing about ghosts. We stop waiting for permission to show up. We start haunting, not in anger, in presence, in the undeniable truth. We were always here. And from that day forward, I stopped begging for a seat at their table, because I was ready to build my own. Some wounds don't start with explosions. They start with quiet cuts, ones you're told to ignore, ones you learn to cover with silence. Growing up, Emily was always the star. She sparkled in every room, whether or not she earned it. If she brought home a B-, it was her best effort. If I brought home straight A's, it was what we expected from you. I was the dependable one, the helper, the fixer, the girl who never missed a school project, who handled carpool, who stayed home with Dad when he got sick because Emily had a party. One winter, when I was 15, Emily took the car out without a license and wrapped it around a telephone pole. Dad paid for everything. No punishment, no lectures. Just, she's young, she made a mistake. When I broke a mug doing dishes a week later, I got a 20-minute talk about carelessness. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was my fault. That being overlooked was some invisible failure on my part. In college, Emily dropped out after 3 semesters. She said the classes weren't aligned with her spirit. Mom and Dad gave her money to travel. Italy, Bali, Costa Rica. Every trip posted online with captions like, "Finding myself." I worked 2 jobs and took out student loans. I finished school with honors. I applied to grad school and was accepted into a competitive program on partial scholarship. The rest I covered myself. When I sent the acceptance letter to the family group chat, only my uncle replied. "Impressive. Keep going," he wrote. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from Emily. By the time I earned my master's, I was already working full-time. I paid off my loans early. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. I thought if I just kept going, kept succeeding, eventually someone would see me. They didn't. When Dad got sick again, I flew back and forth to help. Emily said hospitals drained her energy. Mom said I was always better with the hard stuff. When I asked why Emily wasn't chipping in for Dad's care, Mom simply said, "Emily's not in that kind of position. You understand?" Yes, I always understood. I understood when Emily missed every major holiday, and I still bought her a gift. I understood when she forgot my birthday, but I sent her flowers on hers. I understood when she borrowed money she never paid back. I understood when I wasn't invited to her engagement party because her fiancé wanted a smaller guest list. Even when Dad was in hospice, Emily visited once. She stayed for 20 minutes. When he died, she posted an Instagram story with a candle and the word, "grateful." I planned the funeral. And now, at the reading of his will, she got $8 million. And I got told to figure it out. But here's the thing they never bothered to ask. I already had. While Emily was searching for herself on beaches, I was building. My first real salary went into savings. My second job paid for night classes in tech. I didn't post it on social media. I didn't announce anything. When I got my first major contract as a freelancer, I reinvested all of it. I didn't rent, I bought. A 2-bedroom condo I renovated myself, room by room. When I wasn't working, I was learning. Marketing, product design, automation. And then came the idea. A software platform designed for small, creative businesses, freelancers like me who needed structure, tools, but not bloated enterprise systems. I built it in silence. I launched it quietly. And it took off. Within 2 years, I had a team. Within 4, I had revenue that surpassed anything my father ever made in a year. And still, I said nothing. Not to my family, not to the people who only saw Emily. Because it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need to be chosen to be powerful. That I didn't need to be seen to be real. When I sat in that will reading and heard the numbers, I wasn't shocked by the money. I was shocked by how unsurprising it all was. Of course, it went to Emily. Of course, I was expected to keep going, head held high. That had always been the role assigned to me. Second place, silent strength. But strength has an expiration date, and mine was now. They thought I would leave that room quietly, like always. And I did. But this time, not in shame, in strategy. Because the thing about the ones you overlook for too long is, eventually, they stop waiting for your permission to shine. They do it on their own. And when they do, the silence becomes thunder. 3 months passed before I heard from Emily again. She sent a text that read, "Hosting a little housewarming at the new place. Would be great if you could come. No pressure, though." No pressure. That was rich. I stared at the message for a few seconds before typing a reply. "Thanks, I'll stop by." No emojis, no exclamation points. Just that. The party was already buzzing when I arrived. Their mother, our mother, stood near the entryway in a champagne-colored wrap dress, beaming as if she were the one being celebrated. Emily was flitting between guests, cocktail in hand, laughing a little too loudly. Her new house was a sprawling estate tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac just outside the city. Vaulted ceilings, sleek glass staircases, marble countertops, everything curated to perfection. I watched as distant cousins marveled at the decor, complimenting Emily with every breath. I knew exactly how much the house cost. I knew when the offer went through, when the inspection was finalized, when the keys were handed over, because I was the one who sold it to her. Or more precisely, the holding company I founded 3 years ago, Delcrest Holdings LLC, was the one that bought the land, developed the property, and put it up for sale. It was a quiet side venture. Real estate had always fascinated me. I'd acquired the land under a different name, funneled everything through the company, and kept the ownership hidden. Not illegal, just strategic. When I saw Emily's name come through as a potential buyer, I didn't say a word. Not to her, not to anyone. I signed off on the sale, with one condition built discreetly into the contract. The land title remained under lease for the first year, pending transfer. That clause was buried in a pile of legalese Emily definitely didn't read. Now, I walked into a party thrown inside a house that technically still sat on my land. And no one in that room had a clue. "Oh, look who's here," someone said, drawing out the syllables like a tease. I turned to see my cousin, Mark, grinning with a drink in hand. "Didn't think we'd see you at one of these, still working those 18-hour days?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." Emily floated over a minute later. "Glad you came," she said. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were scanning for someone more important. Our mother joined the circle, holding a crystal flute. "Doesn't it just look like something out of a magazine? Emily has such an eye for style." I nodded. "It's a beautiful place, truly." Emily touched my arm like we were close. "Don't be shy. There's plenty of wine and snacks, and the backyard fire pit is amazing at night." I thanked her and moved toward the kitchen, watching people circulate through the space like ants in designer clothes. My mother caught up with me near the charcuterie table. "I'm glad you came. I know things have been complicated, but it's nice to see you here. It means a lot to your sister." I turned to face her. "I'm sure it does." She tilted her head. "You've always been good at letting things go." That line again. like it was a virtue, like I should be proud of never demanding anything. I didn't answer. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway that led to the back. Outside, I found the venue manager. His name was Tyler. We'd spoken briefly earlier, just before the party. "Hi," I said, catching his attention. "Is the schedule still the same for the last half hour?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We'll queue up the address file and guest presentation when you give the signal." "Perfect." Tyler glanced at the crowd. "Your event or hers?" "Technically, hers," I replied. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Back inside, I walked past a group of relatives clustered in the living room. Someone was retelling a story about Emily's teenage rebellion phase, painting it as charming and quirky. Someone else laughed and said, "She's always had that fire. But look at her now, landed on her feet, built this from scratch." I didn't correct them. I didn't mention the trust fund she'd drained twice. I didn't mention the business idea she tried to pitch that was just a ripoff of a subscription box she saw on TikTok. I didn't even mention the house. I just smiled and kept moving. That's the thing about power. If you have to shout about it, you probably don't have it. But when you hold it quietly, in contracts, in LLCs, in silence, it moves everything without being seen. I looked around the room again. Glasses clinked. Jokes were told. Emily tossed her hair and basked in her curated success. She didn't know she was standing on land I still legally owned. She didn't know the next 30 minutes would flip everything. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. It was balance. Not for them, for me. Because you can only be erased so many times before you decide to write yourself back in, with a pen they'll never hold. I checked my phone. One message blinked from Tyler. "Ready when you are?" I pocketed the phone and sipped my drink, calm as ever. The party wasn't over, but the story they'd written about me, that was about to end. The clinking of glasses quieted as Emily raised her hand, signaling the crowd to gather. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice projecting with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. "This house has been a dream, and I'm so grateful to celebrate it with everyone I love." Applause followed. Our mother beamed from the corner. Then I stepped forward. "Emily, if I could say a few words? Just a brief moment." Emily blinked in surprise. She looked at our mother, who nodded slightly. "Of course," Emily said, stepping aside. "The mic is yours." I faced the room with a calm that came from months, years, of restraint. "Thank you, everyone, for making this night what it is. It's beautiful to see a home full of joy and family, and as someone who values property and structure, I wanted to say something small about this one." A few people chuckled politely, unsure where I was going. I continued, "You may not know this, but this house, this incredible, stunning home, sits on land owned by Delcrest Holdings." Silence. A few heads turned. A distant cousin whispered, "Delcrest? Isn't that a development company?" I nodded. "Yes, and I own Delcrest Holdings." A ripple moved through the room. Emily furrowed her brow. "What are you talking about?" I looked her in the eye. "The land your house sits on, it's still under lease. The purchase agreement included a clause, standard in some developments, that gave Delcrest the right to hold the title for a probationary period. You didn't notice it. I assumed you wouldn't." Emily's jaw tightened. "That's not possible. I bought this house. I own it." I reached into my bag and took out a single envelope. "The house is yours, Emily, but the land still belongs to my company." I handed her the envelope. "Inside is an offer. You can purchase the land outright, at current market value, $2.4 million. You have 60 days to decide. If not, Delcrest will not be renewing the land lease." The room froze. Our mother stood up from her chair, her voice sharp. "Why are you doing this? What kind of game is this, young lady?" I looked directly at her. "It's not a game. It's business. And it's clarity." She narrowed her eyes. "We're family. You're punishing her. For what?" I held her gaze. "I'm doing this because I stopped accepting crumbs." Emily's face turned red. You blindsided me. This is disgusting. I said quietly. You invited me to a party inside a house you didn't fully own, to boast about your success, while mocking mine. All I did was let the facts speak for themselves. Gasps whispered across the crowd. Our mother shook her head. You've changed. I nodded. I have. Emily gripped the envelope like it might burn through her fingers. You're just bitter. I said, no, I'm just done being invisible. I turned to the rest of the guests. Enjoy the evening, truly, it's a lovely space. But if you're curious, check the county records. You'll see the name on the title. Then I walked toward the exit, not in a rush, not in anger, just moving forward. Behind me, the hum of voices picked up again, confused, rattled, searching for a way to make sense of what just happened. The murmurs followed me as I crossed the lawn. A few guests looked away when I passed. One or two looked as though they wanted to say something but didn't. I could feel their unease trail behind me like smoke. Outside, the air was cool, crisp. It smelled of freshly watered grass and new beginnings. My heels clicked against the stone path as I walked, unhurried, toward my car parked beneath a swaying oak. I walked to my car, parked at the end of the drive. I sat in the front seat for a moment, the envelope still fresh in my mind. My hand shook slightly, not from nerves, but from the release of tension that had been building for years. Inside that house, I had been dismissed, underestimated, and cast aside. And in one calm, clear moment, I reclaimed everything they thought I'd never have. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about confronting the reality they built and placing my own name in stone, legally and figuratively. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, clear, quietly proud. The power was never in raising my voice. It was in knowing exactly when to speak and what to say, not to humiliate them, but to finally be undeniable. Because for every dinner I'd been excluded from, every achievement brushed aside, every moment I was told to be the bigger person, I had stored those memories, not to weaponize them. To remind myself, I was never weak. I was simply waiting. Now, I wasn't waiting anymore. They could scramble, they could panic, they could beg, but I'd done what they never imagined I could. I'd built something too powerful to ignore, and I did it without their approval, without their money, without their permission. And in that silence after the announcement, I saw their faces, not angry, not even ashamed, just stunned. Like the illusion they'd built around me had cracked. They had always defined me by what I didn't have, what I didn't get, what I didn't say. Now they had to reckon with what I had quietly built, what I had chosen not to show them until it was written in ink. I remembered every birthday party where my gifts were forgotten, every graduation where they clapped harder for Emily, every time I paid the bill and was treated like an afterthought. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain. I had the deed. That was all the explanation anyone needed. Let them whisper. Let them argue. Let them rewrite the memory however they pleased. The facts wouldn't change. The land was mine. The power had shifted. And for once, I wasn't the one left behind. They could either step into reality or keep living in the version of the story where Emily was the only one who mattered. But I had rewritten my chapter, with signatures, with leverage, with truth, and I would never go back to silence again. As I drove through the winding road out of the neighborhood, I passed the same landmarks I'd seen since childhood, the old park, the bakery we used to walk to, the library where I'd read while they forgot to pick me up. Only now, everything looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. For so long, I'd wondered what it would take to be seen, to be valued. Turns out, I never needed to be chosen by them. I just needed to choose myself. And tonight, in a room full of faces that had once looked through me, I watched them finally see me. They may not have liked what they saw, but they wouldn't forget it. Not now. Not ever. The days after the party were strangely quiet. At first, I expected a storm, a phone call, a threat, some kind of retaliation, but nothing came. Not right away. The silence that followed was almost eerie, like the eye of a hurricane. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix things. I wasn't the one smoothing things over. I had made my move, and they were left to sit in the mess they created. Then came the text from Emily. "Can we talk? I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can work something out." I stared at it for a full minute. Then another text followed. "If you're planning to sell the land, at least give me a chance to match the offer. Don't make this personal." But it was never personal. Not really. Not in the way Emily thought. It was principled, and that made all the difference. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the property portfolio to my real estate attorney and said, "List it." A week later, the land was under contract. A buyer had swooped in, one who understood the value, appreciated the location, and didn't insult me at dinner tables. The deal closed quickly, cleanly, officially. The home Emily had flaunted was still hers, for now. But she would have to move it, buy the land, or negotiate with someone new. I was out. I had stepped away, with dignity and full clarity. Then the messages from our mother began. "You've really disappointed me. I never thought you could be this cold." Emily is devastated. Each one landed with the same hollow thud, like the guilt they'd always used on me. But this time, I didn't carry it. I didn't reply. Not once. I didn't need to. There was nothing more to say. Eventually, my brother reached out too. He hadn't been at the party. He lived out of state and rarely involved himself. But the rumor mill had spun its thread. "Is it true you owned the land? You didn't tell anyone?" I told him yes. It was true, and I had no regrets. "They're all talking about it," he said. "Mom says you embarrassed the family." "No," I told him. "I just told the truth in front of people who preferred the lie." I didn't hear from him again after that. And I didn't need to. Because I wasn't looking to heal what had never been whole. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't even seeking justice. I was seeking peace. And peace, it turned out, came with boundaries. That fall, I threw my own party. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, just because I wanted to. My closest friends came, a few mentors, my team, no family, just love. I hosted it on the rooftop of my building, one I actually owned. The city lights stretched behind us like a soft horizon. Laughter rose into the air like music. There were no champagne toasts or extravagant announcements, just quiet joy, real presence. I sat in a white dress, barefoot on the deck, a glass of wine in my hand, the kind of stillness in my chest I never knew I was allowed to feel. One of my friends, Sarah, leaned over and said, "You look so different lately, lighter." I smiled. "I feel different." She asked, "Was it hard, cutting them off?" I thought for a second. It wasn't cutting them off. It was finally realizing they never truly held me, and I just stopped pretending they did. She nodded. "That's heavy, but freeing." I said, "Exactly." The next day, I went for a walk. Alone. The city was quiet in the early hours, and I wandered past a bookstore I used to visit in college. Inside, it still smelled like paper and dust and memory. I picked up a journal and ran my fingers across the cover. Later that night, I wrote one line on the first page. They told me to go work. So I did. But not for them. It became my quiet mantra. Every time I wondered if I had gone too far, I remembered all the times I had been expected to stay small. Every time I thought about reaching back out, I remembered how easily they had discarded me when I didn't serve their vision of success. Every time I missed the idea of a family, I reminded myself that love is not a favor, it's a practice, a decision, and they had made theirs, over and over again. So had I. Emily would be fine. She always was. With or without that land, she would land on her feet, maybe for the first time without someone else cushioning her fall. And as for me, I was more than fine. I was whole, without applause, without performance, without compromise. In time, Maybe they'd rewrite the story. Maybe I'd be the villain in their version. That was fine. I wasn't living in their version anymore. Because closure, I realized, doesn't come from making them understand. It comes from understanding myself and honoring what I now knew. I wasn't the spare. I wasn't the bitter one. I wasn't the background. I was the architect of my own peace. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. The end. Did you enjoy the story? Tell me in the comments if you thought it was great, medium, or bad.